You started off, you've got a nice book, which is a written constitution. In the UK, we famously don't have that. We just have some sort of muddling through. So in the UK, case law and judicial reviews and judgments and stuff is really important to how the law is actually applied. I wonder if you had anything like that in Pakistan, and if you were thinking about including the kind of actual implementation of the law in your models as well as the written constitution part of it, and whether that's a kind of factor in how it's applied.
So we already are vectorizing the bills that are getting passed. So the knowledge base does contain some of the very recent bills, as well as the sessions that take place at the parliament. Our government is modeled very much like the UK, just like the two houses. We also have two houses. There's a parliament, there's a senate. So we already are parsing and vectorizing the bills, the actual implementation of the laws, as well as the parliamentary proceedings. So we have that capability built in Numaida to support that.
Great. Okay, I can see that being sort of how things are working in real time being really important to how it's working. So
Yes.
that's interesting. Yeah. Cool. All right. I'm going to take the top question then. So, how confident are you that Namarenda, sorry, I don't know how you say it, Namarenda, is providing accurate update information? I guess you kind of just sort of covered that, but yeah.
So we've had multiple rounds of testing. This is not something we deployed today. This has been in production for over a year now. And we have a couple of very powerful users who've been testing it, who have been like Sana herself uploads a law, then goes and checks it for sanity. So with systems like this, it's very important to have a man in the middle. We do have a ML flow implementation to look at the traces as well, to see if we are getting the accurate information and whether Numinda is hallucinating. So far, it hasn't, because and I suspect because we've kept it very simple. The prompt is not very lengthy, and the knowledge base is using one of the better embedding models. So I'm very confident that it provides accurate, up-to-date information, because it the prompt instructions. If you look at those on our GitHub, you will see that we've specified it to not use knowledge from anywhere else, like not make stuff up, not use the model's own knowledge, but to run a query, get the vectors, and answer only from those. And if you don't have that information, just apologize. There is no need to make information up. So I'm very, very confident that it's providing accurate information.
Yeah, great, thanks. And then I think you've covered the second question, and the last one there is about the costs and the maintenance and stuff, if you don't mind talking a bit about that.
So it's we are funding it on our own right now, and based on the traffic we are getting, it costs us around some $65 in tokens, worth of tokens. But these are input and output tokens, and we pay $20 for Vercel. And it's using. I think I saw a question about what model am I using. Oh yeah, so yeah, that it's GPT-4o. But we've been playing with Claude, and we're working on a new backend, which is based on Python. And the idea is that we should be able to swap the models on the fly, just like an environment variable using one of these frameworks like DSPY. So as we are getting to add more knowledge documents to Numinda, we are planning to use one of those frameworks. Which will make it agnostic. Like whenever we wish, we can change the model. So at the moment, I would say we're paying between $190 right now based on the queries we are getting. Um, that's how much it's costing us. And Code for Pakistan is funding it itself.
Yeah, I guess answer any question about AI and LLMs at the moment is changing day by day. So you might be
Yeah.
paying a quarter of that next month, but
Yes, yes, definitely.
before we move on to Julie and Alex, is there any questions in the room for Ali? Don't think so. We've got time to come back if you do. So I had questions for you. I've never seen a talk that combined rice production and screen scraping before. I absolutely loved it. It's brilliant. I had a question. So I guess the first one is like, are the meetings online? Are these things you can attend virtually, or do you have to go to them in person?
That also depends on the municipality, which is another challenge. Some places after COVID have kept the online option. Some places have somewhat intentionally gotten rid of it. So a lot of them are in person only.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah.
Yeah, I think especially the places where we work are very red, i.e. Republican, and so like, I don't know if anti-COVID would be the right phrase, anti-science, however you want to describe it. And so very much, yes, in person. And sort of touching on, I saw someone else's question on here, like internet is not widely accessible in a lot of those areas, and so it would be difficult for them to even stream over Zoom, I think.
Right, so it's not necessarily useful, yeah. We had the same thing over COVID. We had meetings could be held online and streamed, and then when kind of the lockdown finished, they were like back to in person, and that had lots of implications. I guess, so one of the other questions is, have you seen any evidence that you've done all this like fancy work on detecting the right words and the entity extraction stuff. Are there councils that are deliberately obscuring the content of their meeting, like using kind of project code names, or kind of like trying to get around some of this at all, or is there some sort of malicious activity there?
That's a good question. I think we're a little early to be able to tell that. I would not put it past some of the communities that we're working with.
Probably good success criteria, right? Like if you've done really well, then they'll do it. Yeah,
definitely wouldn't put it past them. Which is, I also think the helpful part about the kind of co-design of the system is we can continue to assess the kind of words and topics that we are thinking about adding. And so if we have people who are more routinely involved, it'll be easier to know like what is the language that we should be using. And again, to the point of, it is illegal to talk about things that are not on the agenda. And so if we did find that the agendas are not appropriately descriptive of what's happening, that's also something that can be reported and flagged.
Yeah, I can see, but like something like Project Blue is, you've got some kind of weird code name. And then the last question I had, sorry, I'm going to go on to that in a sec, is do you think about a mechanism for kind of power users just to say this is definitely, like maybe your system hasn't detected it, but someone to say this is definitely about the thing we care about, and therefore notify other people, just kind of go straight back to Web 2 tech rather than fancy new tech? Yeah,
I can just speak to that quickly. In our co-design session, we kind of identified the need for the ability for users to flag any irrelevant agenda, and then also for users to submit textually a comment of like, hey, I know that there's this topic that came up and I'm not seeing it listed, and that feedback can be, because obviously if we don't flag it, it's not going to be there for them to respond to, but having that feedback qualitatively can help inform, are there specific topics that we're missing?
Yeah, and I guess
I think it's just, you just speak.
Okay, I guess now that I think about it too, we could always have like a filter where we let people see all of the agendas as well, even the ones we didn't flag. And if someone's really interested in being like a community scientist for us and helping us gather data, that would definitely work as well.
Yeah, I've certainly found from the work we've done in the UK about crowdsourcing that you get, you might get one person who reads absolutely everything and will be like an absolute power user for it. Yeah. Cool, so on to the Slido. So the top question there is about, I guess, how was it working with local authorities? I guess to reframe it slightly, have you kind of reached out to them and tried to engage them in getting this better, or what's that relationship like? Yeah.
I would say our relationship is first and foremost grounded in tribal governments. So we have very strong relationships with the tribes that we work with, and legal MOUs and a lot of kind of things to acknowledge the sovereign nations that we're working with. And we work a lot with intertribal organizations who act as kind of facilitators between tribal interests and state interests. So we work with them probably most closely. We haven't really reached out to many local authorities. That could be something that comes up down the line. But we tend to just start with partner interests and then can kind of go from there.
Yeah, I think that's a good question, and I was actually thinking about this during the Neminder presentation, like, what if we, went to a city and told them we were trying to make this, maybe they would make it easier for us to access their information. But I could see to the second part of this question that there may also be, bad actors who want to hinder this. And so perhaps it would, if we started in a city that was a little bit more democratically friendly, like Boston loves TICTeC, and so maybe we could start by working with them and they would help, and then we sort of figure it out from there. But yeah, to this point, it's really less about, we haven't really spoken to any of those cities or counties.
Yeah, great. And then I think this next question is more broadly about, buy-in, expanding users, kind of growth, if you want to use a kind of startup-y word. So if you can talk around that a bit.
Yeah, I'd say the interest has been pretty significant and kind of continued, maybe even more so as the federal landscape in the U.S. is a disaster, to put it lightly. And so I think our tribal partners have a maybe renewed interest in what they can influence locally, because Monoman is most impacted by local actions and regulations. And so thinking, how can we influence kind of starting grassroots and going out from there? So a lot of interest from our groups. We're still in our kind of development phase, so this hasn't really gone out to a wide user base yet, but we're really excited to get feedback. And as Alex mentioned, it is part of a larger interactive dashboard project that we're making. And there's been a lot of buy-in from that, from natural resource managers, tribal historic preservation officers, policy analysts. So I think there's a lot of different user groups that I think I could see using it for different things.
And yeah, for the second part of it, like how we would get people interested if we expand to more cities, that's a great question. I think my hope would be that, I guess, to the prior question, if cities buy in, then maybe they would let us do some sort of, maybe they would promote it within the means that they already have locally. Otherwise, it would probably have to be like, we've familiarized ourselves with what social media you can get on easily, and Reddit is the big one. So maybe it would even just be going onto Reddit in different cities and, making a post to let people know that this is a tool.
It sounds like you've done a really good thing there, which is start with the community of interest and build the tool for them, rather than build the tool and then find a community of interest.
Yes.
So that's the right way around to do it. So yeah, perhaps you want to stick with that. Yeah. Any questions in the room for these two? Yeah.
I thought you called on. Does this connect to any other trends that regarding participation in tribes that you think in the United States, that the attitudes towards participation being more urgent is more general? That's part one question. And then the other is, how have you seen the nature of participation? You'd mentioned that it seemed more urgent to participate locally and influence things locally. Does that kind of manifest, or how do you know, and what does it look like? Yeah, those two questions. Thanks.
So if I'm understanding correctly for the first one, it's sort of like how the participation in local meetings translates, or how that reflects perhaps participation overall by tribal communities in governance. Yeah.
You had mentioned that you were seeing participation change in tribes or their attitude towards influencing local politics, given the new administration.
Yep, understood.
Given that, how do you see that manifesting first? And do you think that's a more general trend in tribal politics in the United States?
Got it, I see.
Do you want to
No, go ahead.
Yeah, to answer that, I think, tribes, and a conversation that I've been having a lot with folks is, yes, this administration is particularly hostile, but also we have to remember that Native nations have been facing a hostile government for the last hundreds of years. And so a trend that has come up in our conversations is, this is nothing new in the sense of constantly needing to reassert sovereignty, treaty rights, traditional life ways. So yes and no. I think there is this increased urge to respond based on federal actions. Whatever you think of Biden, he actually passed some of the most comprehensive tribal kind of reinforcements and funding mechanisms in the US in terms of renewable energy, in terms of childcare credits, in terms of tribal historical rights. And so I think there is a sense of backsliding from that progress that was made. So definitely that interest. I'd say it has manifested, though, a lot in this renewed interest in tribally led research efforts. And, we've seen we can't really rely on NSF funding. We can't really rely on federal funding. So where can we pool tribal knowledge, resources? We partner with a tribal university. And so we're really interested in how can we kind of build capacity and support research initiatives within tribal institutions. And I think that's one way people have been responding.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was going to say something pretty similar, where even even beyond sovereignty, as we've spoken about it, I've seen in my work that a lot of tribes are thinking of other sorts of sovereignty. So for example, like food sovereignty. The university that we work with, they have a farm and they're really trying to get that going now so that they're no longer reliant on federal funds for food, because federal funds really support a lot of the tribal nations in terms of getting them food, getting them money for education, things like that. And so thinking about how they can bring back traditional foods for foraging besides just the rice. I think that's some of the bigger things we've seen is maybe becoming even more local, hyper-local, in fact, yeah.
Yeah, maybe just one more, quote to jump on that is that a lot of the land and natural resource management is already stewarded by, Native nations. So this isn't necessarily like shifting the roles and responsibilities of ongoing work, because Native nations do this work already and are already doing it. It's trying to figure out how can we make other jurisdictions less of a burden to the work that they're trying to do already.
Hi, I'm Julio. I'm from Brazil. I have a quick question and a follow-up. The public meetings you scrape, they are published by themselves, alone, not anything else attached that you have to filter out, right? Okay. Because the projects I deal with they have basically the same challenges, and I'm very interested in your process and the time span you took for modeling the NLP tasks, the classification, how many people were involved, how it took every iteration, how much time it took for every iteration, what were the roles of each people. I know you said Julia worked on this a bunch. So what are the people that were involved in it, what were the roles, how many time it took, and I'd like to talk to you a bit more after this session.
Yeah, but we're the people. We're the only people. Yeah, just talk to us.
Yeah, the short answer is we have a very large research collective, and this is actually, I would say, a small part of the work that we do. A huge portion of the work that we do that Alex leads is creating and distributing microclimate sensors for monoman habitat monitoring. And then the other half of our team does some sort of institutional and resilience kind of governance theme research. And so this kind of nests in between those and kind of emerged from partner conversations of this would be a useful tool. And so it maybe wasn't originally on our horizon as something that we would be working on, but again, we're trying to be very driven and responsive to the needs of partners. And so when they said, hey, this is something we'd really like, that sort of became our task. So short answer, us.
And at the beginning, we thought it would be easy, by the way. We were like,
Yeah.
oh, okay, scrape some agendas, look for some words, add some stuff. And yeah, it's like most good problems, it's become more difficult the further we dive in.
Yeah, I'd say timeline-wise, it's probably been 6 months or so, like total start to finish in terms of research, co-design, talking to partners, trying to get a sense of what jurisdictions should we look at. There was some interest initially at federal policy, but then as we kind of found like that exists, and so pointing those resources to people, making sure they're aware that those resources exist, and then being able to turn our attention to this. So it's an ongoing process. Since it's not our like full-time focus, it kind of creeps along as we talk to partners and make advancements.
I'm reminded of the developer's credo of we do not do this because it's easy, we do it because we thought it'd be easy when we started, which is like how a lot of projects work out. Yeah. Cool. Are there any other questions, or should we call her? Will, go ahead.
Shall I pass this? Probably faster than me going now.
No, that's all right. Hi. First of all, thank you very much. This was a really fascinating presentation. I was wondering, sort of following up with the previous question, webscapers can be like notoriously hard to maintain. If a website changes in any way, they can break. I was wondering how you envision maintaining sort of what you've got already, and also if you're planning to expand to, scrape more local authority sites across the US. Like how do you envision keeping it all working when things can change?
Yeah, I have thoughts about that. So the towns and counties that we work in now, like anyone who's been to the U.S. or is familiar enough with the U.S., like if you've been to northern Wisconsin, you know that they are not changing their website anytime
it's like
soon.
HTML sites from the like early 2000s.
Yeah.
mostly.
So at least I think, you know, with those, we should be okay going forward. My vision in thinking about this is that we can't do it all manually. So like at this point, it's been like, go to a city or a county, figure out how they store their agendas, where they store them, how they store them, make it work for that. But that, of course, doesn't scale. And so I think that we need to have some mix of maybe people pointing us to an example or two of where, so, you know, if you wanted your city to be included, you'd say, okay, here's a couple examples of how they store it. And then hopefully AI would help us fill in some of the code, and then maybe, you know, if you open source it, maybe you'd fill in some of the code, or maybe, you know, when we have time, we would just go in and fix it. That's sort of the vision I have.
Yeah, and maybe we could also get to a point with this. I think, you know, the goal the ideal would be that local governments actually are responsive enough and responsible enough to send advance notice and have ongoing transparent communication with tribes. So I also think, you know, this is a great intermediary tool for transparency. What would be ideal is, you know, we don't have to do this because the town actually, you know, does what they're supposed to do and communicates on time effectively with the correct people who work in a government capacity in the tribe and can then kind of encourage people to go out. So I also think, you know, we don't have to think of it as like a forever static thing. You know, we can do this for a year and then go to the town and say, hey, we've been tracking these trends over the last year and noticed XYZ. You really need to be in conversation with these people, and but that also, of course, relies on some amount of goodwill and willingness to kind of do what is right. So.
Great, thank you. I think, is this working? I don't know. I think we're out of time, so I think if we can all thank Ali online, sorry you couldn't be with us, and Alex and Julia as well. So great, thank you so much.